Singapore, a country known for safety, efficiency, and almost perfect order. But behind the spotless skyline and strict laws lies one of the most psychologically controlled prison systems in the world. Not the biggest, not the most violent, but one of the most calculated. Because Singapore's prisons aren't built around chaos, they're built around precision. Every light, every movement, every meal, every camera. Even the way inmates walk is controlled. And the moment you enter that system, it begins reshaping you immediately. Meet Arif, 28 years old, works in logistics, ordinary young man. But one night, he agreed to help collect a debt for an illegal money-lending syndicate, a loan shark runner. At first, it sounded like a simple task. Splash paint on a debtor's door, hang a threatening note, take photos for proof, until Singapore police traced the syndicate through the island's vast surveillance network. Thousands of cameras watching housing blocks, elevators, streets, and void decks across the city. In Singapore, disappearing is almost impossible. Now, Arif stands inside the state courts waiting for judgment. The judge looks down at the file. Then comes the sentence. 4 years imprisonment and 6 strokes of the cane. The courtroom goes silent, controlled, clinical. Arif's mother starts crying quietly behind him. But before he can even process the words, a prison officer touches his shoulder. Stand up. And just like that, the state begins taking him away. Once convicted, inmates are escorted through restricted corridors beneath the courthouse into the state court's lockup facility, hidden from public view, a transition space between freedom and prison. Arif is brought into a holding room, white walls, metal benches, fluorescent lights, no windows. His wrists are shackled. The first thing officers do is verify identity, name, identity number, case file. Then fingerprinting begins. Then photographs. Then comes the uniform. An officer hands him prison-issued clothing, a white shirt, blue shorts. The message is immediate. You are now part of the institution. Then comes the intake interview. An officer sits across from him with forms: marital status, religion, next of kin, medical conditions, drug history, gang affiliation. Singapore prisons classify inmates heavily before housing them. Security level, behavioral risk, medical vulnerability, and even escape risk. Before Arif even reaches prison, the prison is already studying him. Then, the officers photograph his belongings one by one. Every item is cataloged before being sealed and transferred into storage. It won't be returned until release years later. Then comes the final phone call before transfer. Arif dials home. His mother answers immediately, but for a few seconds, neither of them says a word. Because prison in Singapore doesn't only punish the inmate, it punishes the people waiting outside too. Hours later, Arif sits alone inside the courthouse lockup cell. Then suddenly, heavy footsteps echo through the corridor. Metal doors slam open somewhere nearby. Officers begin moving inmates. The transport vehicle has arrived, the Black Maria. A prison transport vehicle is used to move inmates from the courts to prison. No windows to the outside world. Once the doors shut, Singapore disappears. Then, finally, the vehicle arrives at Changi Prison Complex. Massive gates slowly open. The Black Maria drives inside, and former inmates often describe this exact moment as the point at which reality finally hits. Not the sentencing, not the arrest. This gate. Inside Changi, admission begins all over again. Another search, another identity confirmation, another screening. Then the medical examination. Blood pressure, weight, mental health assessment, drug dependency checks, and even suicide risk evaluation. Everything is measured. Everything is assessed. And before entering his assigned cell, Arif is issued the standard items every inmate receives during intake processing. Everything he now officially owns inside prison fits into a small plastic storage box. Another prison uniform, white shirts, and blue shorts. One pair of rubber slippers, a toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, a plastic mug, a small towel, one plastic spoon, a roll of toilet paper, and for sleeping, a thin straw mat and 2 rough prison blankets. Most inmates fold into makeshift pillows. That's it. No mattress, no bed frame, no fan. Then finally, an officer escorts Arif toward his housing unit. Heavy security gates open one after another. Then the cell door finally opens. Small, concrete, bare. Inside the cell sits a squat toilet and a basic shower area built into the corner. Above, a CCTV camera watches the cell constantly, with no privacy. But strangely, Arif is one of the lucky ones tonight, because the cell is empty. In many Singapore prison units, a space this small can hold 3 or even 4 inmates at once. Human bodies compressed into concrete for months, sometimes years, sleeping shoulder to shoulder, eating together, sweating together, existing together. And inside Singapore's humid tropical heat, the claustrophobia itself becomes part of the punishment. Former inmates often describe it as mentally exhausting, not because of violence, but because eventually there is nowhere left to mentally escape. Singapore's prison philosophy has long defended these conditions as intentional. Prison is not supposed to feel comfortable. The hardship is part of the design. And this is where the real punishment begins. The prison doesn't need to scream at you. The architecture already does. And tonight, for the first time in his life, Arif sleeps inside the machine. The first night inside Changi Prison Complex, Arif barely slept. The first thing Arif notices inside prison, it's the noise and the heat. The keys sound, metal doors, footsteps, and orders. A constant mechanical rhythm echoes through the corridors of Changi Prison Complex. At 5:30 a.m., the lights come on, every single day. No matter how badly you slept, no matter how exhausted you feel. Inside Changi Prison Complex, time no longer belongs to you. The institution decides when you wake up, when you eat, when you move, when you sleep. Arif slowly sits up from his thin straw mat. Then breakfast arrives through the small opening in the metal door. Bread with spread and a hot drink. Simple, repetitive, functional. The food isn't designed to comfort you, only to sustain you. Then the movement begins. Cell doors open in sequence. Officers escort inmates through monitored corridors lined with CCTV cameras. Electronic doors unlock automatically between security zones, then lock again behind them. Then comes the work assignment. Because inside Singapore's prisons, inmates are rarely left idle. Some work in prison kitchens, others in laundries, logistics units, cleaning teams, or manufacturing workshops. The system turns routine into discipline. Even labor becomes part of rehabilitation. By midday, lunch is served, usually rice with simple side dishes and vegetables. Then the cycle repeats again. More work, more movement, more instructions. Later in the evening comes dinner, another basic meal, another head count, another locked door. And slowly, Arif realizes prison isn't built around violence. Over time, the prison compresses your entire world until life becomes measured only through meal times, head counts, and door openings. Then one morning, guards suddenly pull Arif from his cell. No warning, and immediately, his stomach drops. He already knows what day it is, caning day. Arif is brought into the punishment room. First comes the medical examination. Under Singapore procedure, inmates must be declared medically fit before caning can proceed. Then, officers remove Arif's prison uniform. His wrists and ankles are strapped onto a solid A-shaped wooden frame, the caning trestle. His body bends sharply forward. A protective pad covers his lower back and kidneys. Everything else is exposed. Behind him stands a specially trained prison officer holding a long rattan cane, nearly the thickness of a grown man's thumb. The room falls silent. Then, crack. The first stroke lands like a gunshot. The pain is instant. By the third stroke, the skin begins splitting open. By the sixth, Arif can barely breathe properly. A prison doctor watches nearby for signs of collapse, while officers remain completely calm, almost mechanical. Afterward, Arif is taken to the medical bay. The wounds are cleaned. For weeks, sitting and even sleeping become unbearable. Some former inmates say they could only stand or lie sideways while the wounds healed, but the scars remain permanently, and that permanence is intentional. Because judicial caning in Singapore was never designed only to punish. It was designed to leave a warning behind, not just on the body, but in the mind. Before we continue, let me share something with you. At Red Dot Roast, everything you're watching right now, the visuals, the cinematic scenes, the editing, is powered by AI. Not basic AI, but a full system. A system that lets us create full cinematic, documentary-style videos faster, cheaper, and at a level that wasn't possible just a few years ago. Because today, the world is shifting toward AI-powered visual creation, from TV commercials to full-scale films. And because of that, this channel channel has been able to grow, generate income through AdSense, land sponsorships, and open up opportunities we didn't have before. So we've decided to share it with you, the exact system we use, step by step, behind the scenes as we create the videos. From finding the idea to a fully produced cinematic video using the latest AI methods. And don't worry, you won't need expensive AI tools. We'll show you secret methods on how to do this for very cheap and even completely free. After finishing the course, you'll be able to start making money with AI. You can build YouTube channels, create AI commercials for brands, build AI influencers, or even freelance and sell AI video services, and the list goes on and on. So if you want to learn how to actually use AI to create content and make money, go to studio.red.roast.com and get started. One-time payment, full access, lifetime updates. We'll see you inside. 3 months into his sentence, Arif stops counting days normally. Inside Changi Prison Complex, time changes shape. By now, Arif understands something important. Singapore's prison was never built simply to lock people away. It was built to control behavior. Everything inside the institution serves that purpose. Nothing feels accidental. Every movement is monitored. CCTV cameras watch corridors, stairwells, recreation yards, and housing units. Singapore's prison service openly describes this approach as a prison without guards strategy, using technology to reduce direct supervision while increasing control. The prison watches constantly. Some prison systems around the world rely heavily on physical intimidation. Singapore increasingly relies on technology. The prison doesn't just contain inmates anymore, it studies them. And yet, the strange thing about Singapore prison is that despite how harsh it feels, the system also wants results. According to the Singapore Prison Service, the 2-year recidivism rate for inmates released in 2023 was 21.9%, meaning roughly 1 in 5 inmates returned to prison within 2 years. In comparison, studies in the United States found that roughly 2 out of every 3 released prisoners are rearrested within 3 years. And that's why Singapore's prison system operates almost like behavioral engineering. Not just punishment, control, compliance, predictability. So eventually, Arif enters rehabilitation programs, counseling sessions, religious guidance, behavioral courses, work programs. Then finally, 4 years later, release day arrives. No dramatic music, no emotional celebration, just paperwork. An officer returns his belongings, objects from a previous life. But something feels wrong, because prison doesn't only change your environment, it changes your instincts. Outside the gates, even freedom feels unfamiliar. The sentence doesn't truly end there. Modern Singapore corrections operate on something officials call a prison without walls. Former inmates can still remain under supervision even after release. Curfews, electronic monitoring, mandatory reporting, halfway houses. The prison simply changes form. The walls become invisible. And maybe that's the real evil design of Singapore's prison system. Freedom comes back slowly, conditionally, under supervision. And for Arif, the scars never fully disappear. Not just the caning, but the psychological weight of the prison itself. Long after release, the experience stays inside his head, a permanent reminder that he never wants to come anywhere close to that place again.